I'm Emily Shipp. I work on the psychology of long-term thinking, and both in research and in practice. So, on how we think and plan for the long term, why it's hard, what makes it difficult to do, and some of the things that we can do to make it easier and more manageable and more useful in the present. So, where I help is about making the future useful to us to make decisions, and navigate uncertainty. So today's session is all around reimagining your future self. So taking time and space to explore two possible futures, to compare and contrast them, and to use them to plan next steps in the present. This workshop today is your space to reflect on your future, and not in the sense of creating a perfect possible future, but in a sense of exploration and seeing what could be. So we're going to use a process that's based on actually a lot of peer-reviewed research in psychology and prospection and how we think into the future, but turned into a way that's workable and usable. So I'd like to ask you all just to take a minute to just turn off any notifications, put your phone on silent, and ideally out of reach. Switch your notifications off and give yourself permission just for the next 40 minutes or so, just to give the space to yourself, and just be guided by the process. So the for today, this session, as I've mentioned, is not about creating a perfect future, but trying on a different future a bit like a jacket. The way that we tend to think of our future selves 10 years out or more is a bit like thinking of another person or a stranger. Research in neuropsychology shows that when we think about ourselves, our future selves 10 years out, the area of the brain activated is the same as the area of the brain activated when we're thinking about another person. So that goes some way to explain why it feels so difficult to think for the long-term future and to have a vivid sense of what that could be. But we're going to use a few methods in this workshop today to create a more vivid sense of those futures, such that we can use them to compare and contrast and make sense of what feels right, what feels important, what feels most valuable to you in the present. So this is your space today. Share only what feels comfortable, and anything that's said in this session stays in this session. If you have any questions as you go, please do type them in the chat or raise a hand, and we'll take questions if anyone gets stuck at all in the process or has anything that they want to raise. But we're going to be hearing from you as we go. So there are a few different ways of thinking about change, and there are a few examples that I've put on the screen here. So in the process of making a change, whether that's a change that you want to make in your career or in your personal life, whatever kind of shift or change it could be, whether big or small, just have a think about where you might be in these stages here: the questioner, the browser, the explorer, the pathfinder, or the shifter. And then please just put in the chat which one you would place yourself in right now. There are no right or wrong answers here. Thanks, Jenny. Browser. Great. It's really helpful to hear where you are in the process. And I think especially as I'm presenting and can't see you, it's lovely to hear how you're going through this process as we go step by step. So thank you for helping me stay in touch with reality when I can't see all of your faces. Great. Thanks everyone for sharing in the chat. Please keep those coming in as we go. All right, we're going to move forwards now. So this is our roadmap for today's session. So this is a complete contrast to the career ladder or any sense of things going in a linear fashion, when we know that life just doesn't go that way. We know that life throws curveballs at us, things come in unexpected shapes and patterns. And this is a way of working with it rather than against it. This is where I always like to mention that I work a lot with financial services and people helping to make decisions for the long term. And Standard Life is the only company that I'm aware of who have done research into metaphors. And so the roadmap idea came about from research that Standard Life did, showing that when people think of their careers as a roadmap or a journey, it's a more helpful framework than thinking of it as a career ladder, which implies a straight upwards movement, which very few of us really experience in real life. So the roadmap allows for detours and scenic routes here. So what I'd like you to do is to use this as we go. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, that's great. Then you can make some notes as we go. So anything that you have to hand. The first thing we're going to do is to go backwards before we go forwards. And there's good research and evidence for this. So when we reflect backwards on things that we're proud of, we help to increase our sense of self-concept clarity, our sense of ourself and what's important to us. So this is a really important starting point before going forwards. So the first thing I'd like you to just take some time to reflect on is a shift that you've made in the past. So it might be any time in the last 10 or 20 years, a shift that was significant to you in your life that you made. So just note it down in a few words and just notice what came up. And if you can share how you felt about that shift in the chat, that would be brilliant to know where you're at and how you've experienced that. Rachel, thank you. Uncertain. Relieved, proactive. And when you think about this, this shift that you navigated, definitely no judgment there, Sophie. Really, I think that's a really important point to raise. That self-judgment and self-criticism can make it so much harder to think ahead for the future. It's something that we all tend to do. I notice it's something that is particularly, I think, common for women to critique ourselves, to see how we could be better. So notice self-criticism for sure during the session, but just allow yourself to park it for now. Great, thank you for sharing all of those. So for those who haven't yet finished, just note a shift that you've navigated for the present day and how you felt about that, particularly how you felt about overcoming something that felt difficult or challenging at the time. And then for the next stage, coming to the present day on the map, this is a way of checking in with where you are right now. So this is a 5-point star. You can think of it a bit like a life compass. So we've got 5 points here. So purpose or a sense of meaning, your sense of connection with others, your sense of ownership in the sense of how much you feel that you have some sense of control or a sense of directing where you're going. Not in the sense that, we can control everything because we can't, but just of being able to set a direction. And then money or finances, so how sustainable things are right now. And then energy, which is crucial. How energized or depleted do you feel by the way things are in your life at the present moment or in the recent past? So I'm going to give you a minute there just to rate each one and give you a little example of how that might look. So here I've just drawn on here how that might work. So if the center point is 0 and the end points are 5, then you can mark a little cross between the two and then join them up. And that gives you a sort of a shape that your star has or an area that it covers. So that gives you a way of making quick comparisons because we're going to come back to this later on in today's session. So just take a moment to do that for yourself now. And then just share in the chat which of those 5 points is highest and lowest. So you might put purpose as, if purpose is highest, then purpose / ownership if ownership is lowest. I know for me at the moment, I would say purpose is high. Maybe connection is slightly lower, or yeah. So please do share those. It's really good to get a sense of where you all are. Thank you, Sophie and Joe there. And equally, if this sparks other thoughts for you, then do note them down as you go. This is a process that you can adapt to see what works for you. So if you find that this sparks other thoughts and that's helpful for you, then do make space for that. Now we are going to move on to on the map, the continuity path. So if I scroll back briefly and we look at the whole map, you see that where we are in 2026, the road forks. So we're going to look at two possible futures, one of continuity and one of change or a shift. This doesn't have to be a big change. It just has to be something that's meaningful to you. So we're going to use these two futures much like a jacket. So trying on a jacket in a shop, you were going to just compare and contrast, just to put on one future, see how it feels, see how it fits, and reflect on that. And then a contrast, something else that might be different. See how that feels, see how that fits, and use that as a point of comparison. So looking into the future and planning into the future, we don't know exactly what could come, but we can use the future to reflect on what might be right for us. So having something to compare and contrast, even if it's not the ideal, is really useful, because then we can think of, well, I'd like it to be more like this, or I'd like more connection than that. It gives us a starting point and something that's tangible. And crucially, making these futures vivid, making them feel as real, as relevant as possible, then gives us more to work with, and we're making meaningful contrasts and comparisons. So coming back to our current slide, Sarah, can we see the previous slide again? Step 3. So we were on step 3. There we are. So this is where we are. So now we're going forward to a possible future. This is the continuity path. So imagining that in 10 years' time, 2036, things have stayed the same. You stayed on the same path. So what I'd like you to do is just note down your age in the box there, or just on a piece of paper. And as a useful anchor, just note down the ages of those closest to you. So that might be children, it might be a partner, it might be a close friend or relatives. So just one or two people that are closest to you. What age or stage will they be at that point? And then you're going to take a minute to think about, in some detail, how things might look at that point of time, imagining that you stayed on the same path you are now and nothing radical changed. Obviously, time has passed, but career, general lifestyle, much has stayed the same. And if it's helpful to you, think about a day in the life. So imagining where you might be waking up in the morning, who are the first people that you see that day, and what kind of rhythm or structure does that day have? On an ordinary day, what would you be doing? How would you be spending your time? Who would you be spending your time with? And what would be filling the majority of your day? And put a few notes there. And then crucially, notice how you feel about that. If you feel comfortable to, then just put a word in the chat about how that path makes you feel. Thanks for sharing, Jana. Stuck. I've definitely been there. Tired, apprehensive, possibly bored. Yep, thanks, Trish. Retired and living in Greece. Amazing, Alison. Okay, so yeah, make sure that Thanks, everyone. It's great to see. Really helpful to see where you're at with this. Thank you, everyone, for sharing this. And I hope it's helpful to you to see where others might be in the process as well. There is a tendency to compare ourselves with others, and most often negatively, which means we often don't see the complexities or the struggles that others are going through under the surface. It's really reassuring to know that others have often parallel experiences. Right. So we're going to move ahead to the next stage now. Oh, sorry, before we do that, correcting myself on my slides. So this is the 5-point star again. So much as we did before, in this possible future where things have stayed the same, again, fill out that star using those 5 points, with the center point being the lowest and the end points of the star being the highest. And just rate there how much purpose or meaning you might feel in this possible future, your sense of connection with others, your sense of ownership, money or finances, and energy again. And then notice which points are, rising or falling compared to the present, if any. And again, share in the chat what's highest and lowest for you. Or rather, for this one, maybe let's just go with the lowest. What's the lowest point on the star that you notice? Great. Please keep those coming in as you've worked your way through this example, and make a note of anything else that this sparks up for you. Liz, if it's helpful to you to use your values, absolutely. This workshop is intended to prompt your thinking, so it's not rigid. Use it as helps you. The reason for putting those points on the star is that they're ways of tapping into different senses of well-being. So purpose, connection, ownership or agency, financial stability and energy. So as a way of kind of tapping into things quickly, but each of those points are sparks for other conversations. Like on connection, you might think about how connected you feel to people at work versus the family or friends. Okay, so moving on now, we're going to go to this alternative path. So it's still 10 years into the future, it's 2036, but this time you made a shift. So what I want you to do now is take your lowest rated point on your star and imagine that it rose to 4 or 5 out of 5. So for those of you that put connection down or purpose or money, imagine that you're at a 4 or 5 out of 5. What's changed in this future? And what does life look like for you now? We've got work in here, but this is referred to the workshop we did in November, but you can take this either in the context of work or in a broader life context. So imagining that shift just on that one point on the star, nothing else radical needs to change unless it changes as a result of this one. So once again, take time to think about how that day might look. Where might you be? Who might you be seeing or spending time with? What might the structure of your day look like? What might you be doing or not doing? And how do you feel in this situation? Already we've got some coming in. Great, Joe and Lucy, thank you for that. More agency, more control. And if you've already gone through this, just put in the chat, how does this change path feel? Or what's different? Motivated, energized, at peace. Feeling peaceful and secure, yeah. And what is it about these scenarios, you don't have to share this in the chat, that has achieved this for you? So at this point, you don't need to know exactly how you got there. You only need to know how this situation could be. Great. More aligned, peaceful, and secure. So take a minute just to reflect on what's shifted in this situation and why it's meaningful for you. And I would encourage you to go 1 or 2 steps below the surface. So if you're feeling more aligned or you're feeling more satisfied with life, what is it that makes you feel more satisfied? And then ask a few whys. Why is that? And why is that? Very often it's the things that are just below the surface, and sometimes the outlandish suggestions, there's a real grounding for that. So when I've run coaching sessions in the past, I would always encourage people to, say the thing that they really want, to say the outlandish thing, because very often there's something real behind that. Even if your ambition in 2036 is to be an astronaut, then there'll be something in that you can tap into now. I'll give you a few minutes just to think that through and notice what comes up. And to go one step further, try to get as tangible as you can about this. So if you're coming up with things like a sense of peace or a sense of agency, what is it that's giving you that sense of agency? Very often when we think of the long-term future, we tend to think in headlines and in the abstract. So career goals or targets are sort of isolated. When we need to make sense of things or compare things, we need to have a real tangible sense of how it looks, how does it feel, what is it like to be in that situation, and what specifically is happening. Thanks, Lucy, for sharing that. Prioritizing my own needs over those of others. I think that's something that's very easy to live with others first. So that's a really important one. My question to you be what might that look like? You don't have to share that bit in the chat, but what might that look like, or what might happen when you prioritize your own needs? All right. So now we're going to repeat that 5-point star process, thinking of purpose, connection, ownership, money, and energy in this version of the future. And so as you did before, rating each point so that you can compare the two side by side. If you want to replace one of those points on the stars with something else that's meaningful to you, please do. And once you've done that, then notice what the differences between the two. What's the most noticeable difference you see between the two stars? Nicola, you have a circle. Amazing. I get the sense that then everything's expanded. Unless you've gone right into the middle. Monica, that's a really good point. I'm not sure what's possible here. So at this point, we're temporarily putting aside the logistics and just thinking about what's important to change, or what might a shift look like. And then how that might look day to day and how that might feel to you. And in the next stage, we're going to go on to the specifics, or sort of a next step. Any last things that people are noticing there? Okay, relax at home, great relationships. I'll give you a minute to note down anything else that you're noticing about that scenario, and to notice the specifics, note down the specifics for yourself. So how might things be tangibly different day to day? And then once you've done that, we're going to go further into the future again. So putting aside those two compare and contrast futures, imagine now that it's 2046, and write down the age that you'll be at that point in time and the age of one or two people closest to you. And imagine that at this point in time, you are sitting with a drink, whether it's tea or whether it's a gin and tonic, and you are reflecting back on the present day in 2026. Looking back from 2046, what are you glad that you did in the present in 2026? So this is an exercise called prospective hindsight, or futurists call it backcasting. It's a way of taking a different perspective on the future and our actions in the present, almost like a bird's eye view, that we're going far into the future and looking back. So take a minute to just notice what comes up for you. If you're happy to share it or a part of it, then please do. Or just share what your feeling is at that point in time, looking back on the present. Do you have some advice for your present self, or something that's nagging at you, or that comes into your mind? Leslie, thank you. Yeah, my future self is happy I made the change. And Jana, stop overthinking. Take a moment to do that. And write down anything else that comes up to you when you're reflecting from this point in time. It's sometimes helpful to think both about the things that you're glad of and the things that you regret. These are both important indicators of things that might be in the back of our mind or perhaps need attention. All right. And then once you've done that, we're going to come into the next stage. So you now have three points in the future. You've got the path of continuity, where things stayed the same. You've got the path where there was a shift or a change. And you've got the perspective of your long-term future self. Take a minute there just to notice the differences between those three perspectives. And to use that to reflect on what's most important for you to address now. And this is just a next step. It doesn't mean that you have to have a complete solution. But the first thing, or the most important thing for you to address in the present and your next step. And if you'd like to share that in the chat, just in a word or two, please do. And then once you've got that thing that you think is most important for you to address now, what would be the smallest thing you could do in the next few days? Thanks, Lucy. You already got, review finances, viability to make a change. There are some really useful tools on that we can share, and Abigail can post a link to that or send it over email at the end, I think. Joe, going to the gym, taking care of yourself. Yeah, that doesn't seem trivial at all. That seems important. Sometimes the things that come up here aren't the things that we would logically think would come to mind. So, and that's fine. Sometimes there's something that moves things in the present that isn't what we'd expected. Thanks, Richard. Positive plans, yeah. I would really encourage you to, what would those look like for you? You don't have to share in the chat, but note down what those specifics might be. So what's the next thing you're going to do in the next few days? The smallest thing. How confident are you in taking this step? What would make it easier? And who might support you? Um, and it's important here not to address everything at once. I know I personally have a tendency to do this, to try and shift everything at the same time. Um, but what is helpful is just making one shift that changes things in a small, meaningful way that often allows other things to emerge. So even if you can't see the whole of the way forward, it's just changing the landscape enough to see the next step. There's a quote that I love. It's actually about writing a novel, but it applies to life. That it's like driving a car at night. You can't see the whole of the route, but you can see just far enough ahead of you to make the next step. And I think this is one thing that this exercise can help with, is just seeing the next step ahead and having a sense of what those futures could be. Um, can I have a quick show from the chat of, has everyone managed to find some answers to those questions and find a next step? Will you just give me a yes or a I'm stuck? Because this is definitely a point that some people do get stuck, and I definitely have in the past. And if anyone is feeling stuck, then please don't feel bad about that. This is, I think, often the challenging part. So do ask questions there if you have any. So we've got a bit of extra time, I think, because I was worried about finishing late. So we do have extra time for questions. So if you've got anything that came up or anything that you got stuck on or anything that you're interested in about this process or would like to know, then please do ask questions and post them in the chat. As well as thoughts and reflections. It'd be great to hear how you found the process. And Liz, I liked your point there. Yes, but I need the strength to take the step. I think that's a really important one. What might make it easier for you, or what might make it more doable? Got to lower that first barrier. So even if it's not doing the whole thing, the first tiniest part of it. And Ariana, really hard relate there. Anxious perfectionist and overthinker. Yes, very hard to deal with that. Again, I would really encourage the absolute easiest next step. The motion, the process of starting something or taking one tangible action can help shift that. Please do, if you have any other questions or any other things to share or wondering what the next stage might be, then please do post in the chat. And my final challenge to you would be, or question to you would be, who might you show your map to, your completed map, and who might you share it with? Either someone else that you think might benefit from it, or someone that is close to you that you would just like to share your process and show what you're thinking about. That's a scary thought. Is that a scary thought, Gillian, of sharing the map? And Ashley, what is next? Is that a question to me about what comes next in this process? Or is that your own next step? Sorry, this is a question for me. So what's next? Is if you share the map with someone that you trust, if you can, because this process is helpful when it becomes sociable and social. So you don't have to share everything, but sharing it with someone that you trust helps to make it more real, more tangible, and might help you to move or have forward or have another perspective on some of the areas that you might feel more stuck or more nervous about. So Alison, yeah, your son, yes, absolutely. And I would really encourage, even, and especially the people who uh, are younger, reflecting on strengths at the start of this. It doesn't have to be in any kind of career or school context. Just, starting with one, reflecting on one thing that you've done well, completely changes the way that people engage in this process. So, um, so this is the difference between starting from a sense of lack or of needing to make up for things versus starting from a sense of being enough as you are. And for anyone that feels like that's too fluffy, or it's, feels a sense of self-criticism about that, that's evidence-based. That starting from strengths or tangible examples of what you've already done well in any context puts your mind in a state where it's easier to see possibilities. It's easier to think more flexibly, and that's what we really need when we're thinking for the long term. Leslie, if someone's struggling to imagine due to neurodiversity, yes, it's a really important question. Thank you for bringing that up. I often do say this in workshops, but missed it here. So there are definite differences in the ways that we think about and relate to the future. So one important one is the fantasia spectrum. So the way that we see mental images in our minds really varies. So some people see things in extreme detail and vividness. Other people see things with much less detail. And some people don't create mental images in their mind at all. So you can't bring something to mind visually or in any sense. So that's where drawing things out, sketching things, compiling a couple of examples can be really helpful. And then in terms of ADHD and autism as well, people with ADHD, myself included, tend to have a much shorter mental time horizon. The future feels even further away. Things are very much more focused in the now. So this is where making futures more vivid can be really helpful. So writing down examples of days in the life of, and in one scenario and another, and putting that into as much practical and even mundane detail as possible can be helpful. And making things feel act-onable in the present, such that steps feel easy enough to take. And then self-compassion, I would say, is always really important, is allowing yourself to start where you are rather than where you think you should be. Thank you, everyone, for questions there. Any other thoughts or questions? Really helpful to know where people find this helpful or where they get stuck as well. So please do share anything on that. Oh, KM, is it better to make a number of small changes or just one small change? I would say start with one or max two and just see how that goes rather than increasing the pressure to make more than one change at a time. And then find a way to review it, just to notice what it changed. I say that knowing that my natural tendencies are to start at least 5 things at the same time. But yeah, starting with one. Eva, thanks for sharing that. Scary but insightful, yes. And I think absolutely where you can notice and engage with things, even where you feel resistance to doing that, that's often where the really valuable things are. So thank you for sticking with that. And we will share feedback after the session. So please do fill that in. Please do let us know how you found the session. Sorry, just seeing in the chat. Then, yeah, I'm happy to stay on and answer a few questions for anyone else that wants to stay on after the call. So if there's something that you want to ask, then then that's absolutely fine with me. I'll be here for a few minutes. Okay. So yeah, if anyone has any other questions, please do ask. But otherwise, we'll start to wrap up the session now, I think. Yeah, please do take your maps away. Please do share them with someone. And thank you for being part of today's session.
I just want to say a few words of thanks. So thank you, Emily, so much for holding for and being able to communicate, which is quite difficult when we can't see who we're speaking to. Thank you so many of you for joining us this afternoon and taking out this hour. I know it can be precious at this time of day. We just want to offer just a little bit of signposting of our campaign and some maybe follow-on activities that you might be interested in taking part of. So as I mentioned, we're representing the Careers Can Change campaign, which has been convened by the Standard Life Centre for the Future of Retirement. And this is around supporting people making changes to their career, however big or small. So Sam's just going to pop some information onto the screen for some useful links for you. We got that, Sam? Yeah. So as you can see, there are some links, and we can share these slides with you as well if you're not unable to access them. So for further information, visit our website. It has information of all of our campaign partners, of which there are 8 of us, all offering services in adult careers, advice and guidance, and a lot particularly specialising for people in midlife and beyond, understanding that this is a big period for transition and the extra support that's required to take you through that journey. You can also follow us on our social channels via Instagram and LinkedIn. And a couple of content that might be useful as follow-on from this are the Transferable Skills webinar, which is available in our resource hub on the website, and also the Financing Your Career Change toolkit as well. We've also got a number of other resources which are looking at age being your asset at work, if you're looking at starting up a business as well, amongst other things. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. We would love to have your feedback. There should have been a survey that's popped up on your screen. So if you can please give us that feedback, it helps us improve what it is that we're doing and also develop this work further for you. So if you can just give a couple of minutes of your time to complete that for us, would be really, really grateful. So again, thank you for being with us today and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.